The orbital station Harmony Point hung like a jewel against the backdrop of Earth, its crystalline structures catching the light of the rising sun. Inside its grand ceremonial hall, an unprecedented gathering was taking place. Hundreds of beings, human and alien alike, sat in complete silence as the massive doors slowly opened to admit a solemn procession. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at attention, her dress uniform pristine, medals gleaming under the soft light. Before her lay the metallic silver coffin of Fleet Commander Cathera of the Arcturian Empire, their greatest adversary during the Proxima War, and perhaps the most honorable enemy humanity had ever faced. The decision to hold a military funeral for an alien commander had sparked controversy throughout Earth's territories, but Chen knew it was the right thing to do. When I first met Cathera, Chen's voice carried across the hushed chamber. It was across a battlefield display. Our fleets were engaged in what would become known as the Battle of the Crimson Nebula. We had already lost thousands on both sides, and yet, she paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the podium. And yet, Cathera did something no Arcturian commander had ever done before. They opened a direct channel to my flagship. The assembled crowd stirred. Humans and Arcturians alike leaned forward, many hearing this story for the first time. Among them sat Cathera's own offspring, their iridescent scales shimming with the deep blue of morning. "Admiral Chen," they said to me, "your forces have fought with valor, but this nebula's radiation will kill more of both our peoples than any weapons we wield. I propose we withdraw together, preserve our forces, and meet again on a battlefield where only skill determines the victor." In that moment, I understood we faced no ordinary opponent. Throughout the hall, holographic displays showed footage from the war. Massive fleet engagements where Cathera's tactical brilliance shone through, but also moments where they ordered their ships to pause combat to allow civilian evacuations or coordinated joint rescue operations when natural disasters threatened both species colonies. Cathera fought us for 3 years across 100 star systems, Chen continued, her voice growing stronger. They defeated us in 37 major engagements, but never, not once, did they target civilian populations or use forbidden weapons, even when some of their own command urged such measures. They fought with a code of honor that matched humanity's highest ideals. In the front row, General Martinez, who had lost an arm in the Battle of Proxima Delta, nodded slowly. Beside him, an Arcturian High Commander's facial tendrils rippled with emotion. But Cathera's greatest victory wasn't in battle, Chen said, her voice softening. It came 3 months ago, when they risked everything to warn both humanity and their own people about the void parasites they discovered in the Carina Arm, an ancient threat that would have consumed us all while we fought each other. Cathera sacrificed their life, ensuring we had the data needed to prepare, knowing they would be branded a traitor by hardliners in their own empire. Chen stepped away from the podium, approaching the coffin. Her hand rested on its cool surface as she spoke again, this time more intimately, despite the hall's perfect acoustics carrying every word. In our long history of warfare, humanity has learned that true honor knows no species, no empire, no boundaries. Cathera proved that. They showed us that even in war, we can find reflection of our highest virtues in our enemies. That beneath the divisions of species and ideology, there exist universal principles of honor, duty, and sacrifice. From the ceiling, a shower of light began to fall, a traditional Arcturian blessing of the dead, programmed into the station's systems for this moment. It bathed the coffin in shifting patterns of purple and gold, Cathera's command colors. Today, we do not honor Cathera because they became our ally at the end. We honor them because throughout our long conflict, they showed us the best of what any sentient being can be. Devoted to duty, bound by honor, and wise enough to see beyond the immediate conflict to the greater dangers that threaten all life. The human honor guard raised their plasma rifles, the weapons low hum filling the chamber. The Arcturian honor guard raised their ceremonial energy staves in response, creating a crossed pattern of light above the coffin. Let this ceremony stand as more than a farewell. Chen's voice rang out with final authority. Let it be a beginning. A recognition that across the gulf of space, amid the chaos of war, we can still recognize virtue in our enemies, honor in our adversaries, and hope in our shared future. As the combined honor guard began the complex ritual that would send Cthulhu's remains into the heart of a dying star, as was Arcturian tradition for their greatest warriors, Chen stood at attention. Around her, hundreds of beings who had been bitter enemies mere months ago stood together in silence, united in respect for one who had shown them all a better way. The coffin began to glow as the quantum transportation sequence initiated. In its surface, Chen caught a final reflection. Humans and Arcturians standing side by side, heads bowed in shared reverence. Thera's final victory, she realized, was not on any battlefield, but here in this moment, proving that honor and respect could bridge the gaps between stars and species alike. As the coffin faded from view, transported to its final journey, the first notes of both the human and Arcturian anthems began to play, interweaving in a haunting harmony that had been composed specifically for this moment. The music spoke of loss and hope, of endings and beginnings, of the eternal dance between duty and understanding that transcends all boundaries of flesh and space. Thera was gone, but their legacy was just beginning. In the years to come, the Harmony Point Accords would be signed in this very hall, establishing the first lasting peace between humanity and the Arcturian Empire. And every year, officers from both fleets would gather here to remember the commander who showed them that the greatest victory is not defeating an enemy, but transforming them into friends. The memorial service had ended, but Captain James Rodriguez couldn't leave the observation deck of Harmony Point. He stood before the massive viewport, watching the quantum wake of Cthulhu's funeral vessel as it made its journey toward the dying star Proxima Beta. The same star that had witnessed their greatest battle, and perhaps their greatest moment of understanding. You're thinking about Proxima, aren't you? Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka appeared beside him, her reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. She had served as his tactical officer during that fateful engagement. Hard not to, Rodriguez replied, his cybernetic eye whirring softly as it adjusted to the star's distant glare. That was the day everything changed. The battle had begun like any other. Human and Arcturian fleets facing off across the void, weapons primed, shields humming with barely contained energy. But Proxima Beta's unstable nature had thrown an unpredictable element into the strategic calculations. Rodriguez remembered Cthulhu's fleet formation, not the aggressive wedge favored by most Arcturian commanders, but a peculiar defensive circle. At the time, it had seemed overly cautious. Only later did they understand. Cthulhu knew, Rodriguez said softly. They had analyzed Proxima's stellar patterns and realized what was coming. But instead of using it to their advantage, he trailed off as the memories washed over him. The massive solar flare that had erupted without warning, threatening both fleets. Standard doctrine would have called for a fighting retreat, using the natural disaster to cover an escape while leaving the enemy to their fate. Instead, Cthulhu had broadcast on all frequencies. Attention human vessels. Proxima Beta is entering an unexpected fusion cascade. Your ship's radiation shielding will fail in approximately 17 minutes. My fleet's crystalline barriers can withstand the radiation for 22 minutes. I propose an immediate ceasefire and temporary alliance. Allow my ships to extend our shields around your vessels. We can survive this together, or perish separately. The bridge crew had been stunned. Even more shocking was Cthulhu's next transmission. Detailed technical specifications for their shield harmonics, allowing the human ships to synchronize and integrate with the Arcturian protection grid. It was an unprecedented sharing of military technology and a massive tactical risk. We could have used that shield data to develop countermeasures, Tanaka mused. Cthulhu risked their entire strategic advantage to save our lives. Rodriguez nodded, but that wasn't even the most remarkable part of that day. As the combined fleets had huddled together under the Arcturian shields, riders of the solar storm, Cathera had opened a direct channel to Rodriguez's bridge. For the first time, humans saw the face of their greatest adversary. Crystalline features arranged in an elegant geometry, multifaceted eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Captain Rodriguez, Cathera had said, their translator rendering their harmonic language into crisp English. While we wait out this storm, perhaps we might speak not as enemies, but as sailors of the cosmic ocean. What followed was a 3-hour conversation that changed the course of the war. Cathera spoke of their people's history, their fears of human expansion, but also their growing admiration for humanity's adaptability and courage. Rodriguez shared stories of Earth's past conflicts, how ancient enemies have become steadfast allies. When Cathera spoke about their offspring, Rodriguez said, about wanting them to inherit a galaxy of wonders rather than ruins, that was when I truly understood them. They weren't fighting for conquest, but for preservation. The solar storm had passed, leaving both fleets intact but forever changed. When they finally separated, returning to their respective lines, neither side fired a shot. Instead, Cathera had transmitted one final message. Remember this day, humans. Remember that when the cosmos itself threatened us, we chose to stand together. Perhaps that is a lesson worth more than any victory. In the months that followed, the nature of the war began to shift. Both sides started looking for opportunities to minimize casualties, to demonstrate honor rather than merely seeking triumph. Cathera's example spread through both fleets, the commander who valued life above victory, honor above advantage. You know what still amazes me, Tanaka said, breaking the contemplative silence. Cathera's last tactical analysis was right. If they hadn't warned us about the void parasites, if our fleets hadn't learned to work together during that solar storm, we wouldn't have stood a chance against what's coming. Rodriguez's artificial eye focused on a distant point of light, the edge of the Carina Arm, where the ancient threat was gathering. Cathera saw the bigger picture. They understood that old grudges and territorial disputes mean nothing in the face of extinction. They died making sure we understood that too. A soft chime echoed through the observation deck, the signal that Cathera's funeral vessel had reached its final destination. In a few moments, their remains would become one with the very star that had first brought their peoples together. The Arcturians believe that when their great warriors join with a star, their wisdom spreads throughout the cosmos on stellar winds, Tanaka said. Maybe that's not just poetry. Look how Cathera's example is already changing both our civilizations. Rodriguez touched the viewport, his hand covering the distant point of light that was Proxima Beta. They showed us that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy your enemy, but in the courage to see them as they truly are, to recognize honor, wisdom, and virtue even across the lines of war. As they stood watching, the star flared briefly brighter, Cathera's final moment, their energy joining with the cosmic dance of fusion and light. On dozens of ships throughout the system, human and Arcturian crews stood at attention, paying final respects to the commander who had taught them all that the greatest battles are won not through force of arms, but through force of character. The light faded, but its impact would echo through the ages. The Battle of Proxima had been won not by either side, but by the better angels of both their natures. In the end, that would prove to be Cathera's most enduring legacy. The emergency session of the Earth Defense Council was anything but civil. Admiral Chen watched from her seat as Counselor Marcus Drake pounded his fist on the polished obsidian table, his face flushed with anger. This is nothing short of treason. Drake's voice echoed through the circular chamber. A full military funeral for the alien who led the assault on New Sydney, who destroyed the Ganymede Defense Fleet. Have you all lost your minds? The chamber, carved into the heart of Luna Base, was packed with military officers, political leaders, and media drones hovering silently in the upper corners. The debate over Cathera's funeral had been raging for days, threatening to tear apart the fragile peace that was just beginning to take root. Rear Admiral Victor Santos, his scared face a testament to battles past, rose slowly from his seat. Counselor Drake, I commanded the Ganymede fleet on the day Cthulhu destroyed it. The chamber fell silent. I lost 8,000 good people under my command, but I'm alive because Cthulhu refused to fire on our escape pods, against direct orders from their high command. Santos activated a hologram in the center of the chamber. It showed the aftermath of the Ganymede battle. Escape pods drifting amid the debris, and Arcturian ships carefully maneuvering to avoid them. Cthulhu opened a channel to every pod. Santos continued. They said, "Your defeat is complete, but your lives are not forfeit. War should claim only those who choose to fight." Then they deployed beacon drones to help our rescue ships find us. From her seat, Chen noticed the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Even Drake seemed less certain as he listened to Santos' testimony. But the opposition wasn't finished. Ambassador Lin Wei stood next, her elegant diplomatic robes rustling. While these acts of mercy are commendable, we cannot ignore the broader implications. How will it look to our other allies? To our own citizens who lost loved ones in this war? We're setting a dangerous precedent. Are we? The new voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, League Synopsychologist for the Earth Defense Force. Or are we showing the galaxy that humanity is strong enough to recognize honor even in our enemies? Think about what this gesture says about us. She brought up her own hologram, footage from a dozen different battles, where Cthulhu's forces had chosen mercy over military advantage. Evacuation of civilian colonies, protection of cultural sites, medical aid given to damaged human vessels. Cthulhu wasn't just a great military commander, Mitchell continued. They were a bridge between our species. Every act of honor, every decision to show mercy, helped us see the Arcturians as more than just crystalline warriors. They showed us they were people, with their own code of ethics, their own sense of right and wrong. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Chen watched as veterans defended their former enemy, while politicians warned of appearing weak. But it was the next speaker who changed the tone of the debate entirely. Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez limped to the center of the chamber, her prosthetic leg clicking against the floor. She had been a junior officer during the Battle of Proxima, and her story was legendary. I was trapped in the engineering section of the EFSS Intrepid when Cthulhu's forces boarded us, she began, her voice soft but carrying clearly. We expected to be executed. Instead, Thera themselves led the boarding party. They found me pinned under a fallen beam, plasma fire burning through our hull. Gonzalez's hands trembled slightly as she recalled the moment. Thera ordered their medical team to treat our wounded. They helped seal our hull breaches. When I asked why, they said something I'll never forget. Because a warrior's duty is not to destroy, but to preserve what is worthy in the universe. And courage, no matter its origin, is always worthy. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the media drones seemed to hover more quietly. We're not just honoring Cthulhu, Gonzalez concluded. We're honoring what they represented. The idea that even in war, we can choose to be better than our worst impulses. That honor knows no species. Admiral Chen finally rose to speak. She activated a final hologram, Cthulhu's last transmission, warning of the void parasites. The alien commander's crystalline features were cracked and damaged, their ship falling apart around them as they ensured the vital data reached both human and Arcturian forces. Cthulhu's final act saved both our civilizations, Chen said firmly. They died knowing they would be branded a traitor by hardliners in their own empire, but they did it anyway. Because they understood what some of us are still learning, that the divisions between our species are nothing compared to the threads of honor, courage, and duty that bind all sentient beings. She looked directly at Counselor Drake. We're holding this funeral not because we've forgotten who Cthulhu was, but because we finally understand what they were trying to teach us. That true strength lies not in destroying your enemies, but in recognizing their dignity, their honor, their worth. The debate continued for hours, but the tide had turned. One by one, veterans came forward with stories of Cthulhu's honor in battle, their mercy in victory, their dignity in defeat. Each account painted a picture not of an alien warlord, but of a being who had transcended the boundaries of species to embody universal principles of honor and duty. As the session finally ended, with the funeral arrangements approved by a clear majority, Shen found herself in the observation dome, looking out at the Earth below. An aide brought her Cthera's personal data crystal, recovered from their ruined ship and intended to be included in the funeral ceremony. The crystal contained a final message, meant to be read after their death. Chen activated it, and Cthera's holographic form appeared before her one last time. To those who choose to honor me, the message began. Understand that you honor not an individual, but an ideal. The belief that even in the darkness of war, we can light the way toward understanding. That in recognizing the honor of our enemies, we elevate ourselves. May this gesture be not an ending, but a beginning. The first step toward a future where we stand together against the true darkness that threatens all life. Chen closed her hand around the crystal, feeling its warm pulse. Tomorrow, they would bid farewell to their greatest enemy. But today, they had proven that humanity was ready for Cthera's final lesson, that the greatest victory is not in defeating an adversary, but in transforming them into an inspiration. The day of Cthera's funeral dawned with an unexpected development. 3 Arcturian battlecruisers emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, not as a hostile force, but as representatives of a growing movement within the Empire. Their hulls bore the distinctive purple and gold markings of Cthera's command, modified with symbols of mourning. High Command sent Colonel Maya Harrison to greet them. As her shuttle approached the lead vessel, she couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Just months ago, the sight of these crystalline ships would have triggered battle stations. Now, they were honored guests. The Arcturian delegation was led by First Speaker Vithan, their crystalline form glowing with subtle bioluminescence that humans had learned to recognize as deep emotion. What surprised Harrison was the presence of several other alien species among the delegation, representatives from worlds that had also known Cthera's peculiar brand of honorable warfare. We come not just as Arcturians. Vithan's harmonic voice resonated through the shuttle's translation systems, but as witnesses to a transformation. Cthera's philosophy has spread far beyond our borders. Their death has become a catalyst for change. The journey back to Harmony Point was filled with revelations. Vithan shared how Cthera's actions had sparked debate throughout the Empire. Young officers were questioning the old ways of total warfare. Even the Imperial Council was divided, with a growing faction advocating for Cthera's vision of honorable combat and eventual peace. They called Cthera a traitor for warning both sides about the void parasites. Vithan said their facets shifting in what Harrison had learned was a gesture of determination. But more and more of our people are asking, can one be a traitor to all life itself? Cthera chose to be loyal to something greater than any single empire. The funeral ceremony itself became something far more significant than anyone had planned. As human honor guards stood alongside their Arcturian counterparts, representatives from a dozen species came forward to share stories of Cthera's influence on their worlds. A Centaurian ambassador spoke of how Cthera had protected their ancient temple cities during the war, recognizing their cultural significance even as a supposed enemy. A Rigelian trademaster described how Cthera had established rules of engagement that allowed civilian commerce to continue even through conflict zones, preventing economic collapse across multiple sectors. But it was the arrival of the Void Scouts that transformed the ceremony into a turning point in galactic history. These mysterious beings, ancient enemies of the void parasites, appeared unannounced. Their ethereal forms cast shifting shadows as their speaker addressed the gathered assembly. We have watched and waited. The scouts' thoughts echoed in every mind present, wondering if the younger races would overcome their divisions before the great darkness returned. Cthera saw what we saw, that unity is not merely desirable, but essential for survival. They gave their life to forge that unity. We are here to ensure that sacrifice was not in vain. The scout projected images of the advancing void parasites, a horror beyond normal space, consuming everything in their path. But they also showed something else. Simulations demonstrating how combined human and Arcturian technology, working in concert, could create defenses neither species could achieve alone. Admiral Chen seized the moment. Standing before the assembled delegates, she proposed what would become known as the Harmony Accords, a framework for cooperation not just between humans and Arcturians, but among all species facing the void threat. Cthulhu showed us that honor transcends species, she declared. Now we must prove that cooperation can transcend old hatreds. We are not here just to mourn a worthy enemy, but to birth a new way forward. Vithan stepped forward to stand beside her. In a gesture that would be replayed across thousands of worlds, the Arcturian extended their crystalline hand, and Chen took it without hesitation. The light playing through Vithan's form created rainbow patterns across their joined hands, a symbolic bridge between their species. Thera once told me, Vithan's voice carried across the silence, that the greatest victory is not to destroy an enemy, but to transform them into an ally. Today, we honor that vision by making it reality. One by one, representatives from other species stepped forward to join them. The Void Scout pulsed with approval, their ancient wisdom recognizing this moment as the beginning of something profound. As Cthulhu's remains were prepared for their final journey into the heart of Proxima Beta, the gathered species began working on the practical aspects of cooperation. Military commanders shared tactical data about the void threat. Scientists compared notes on defensive technologies. Diplomats drafted frameworks for lasting alliance. Harrison watched from her position among the honor guard as history unfolded before her. Thera's funeral had become something far more, a catalyst for the unity they had died to achieve. The old saying about death being a beginning had never felt more true. The ceremony ended not with traditional military honors, but with a new ritual created for the occasion. Each species contributed an element of their funeral rites. Human bugles played alongside Arcturian crystal songs. Centaurian light-weaving danced with Rigelian gravity sculptures. Together, they created something entirely new, a harmony of different traditions united in common purpose. As Cthulhu's coffin began its final journey, carried on waves of combined technology and ritual toward the waiting star, Harrison understood that they were all witnessing the end of one era and the birth of another. The age of isolated species fighting among themselves was over. The time of united resistance against a common threat had begun. And somewhere, she liked to think, Cthulhu was watching with those multifaceted eyes, seeing their final victory unfold, not in the defeat of an enemy, but in the unification of all life against the true darkness that threatened existence itself. 5 years after Cthulhu's funeral, the observation deck of Harmony Point had been transformed. Where once there had been empty space, now stood the Hall of Honor, a vast chamber where the histories of both human and Arcturian civilizations were displayed side by side. At its center, a holographic memorial showed Cthulhu in their moment of final sacrifice, warning both civilizations of the coming darkness. Captain Maria Gonzalez, now commander of the first joint human-Arcturian defense fleet, stood before a group of cadets from both species. Behind her, through the vast windows, ships of multiple civilizations moved in practiced formation, preparing for the battles to come. The void parasites expected to find us divided, she told the assembled cadets. Instead, they found something unprecedented, a unified front of species that had learned to fight as one. That transformation began here, with one commander's choice to value honor above victory. The impact of Cthulhu's legacy had rippled far beyond military matters. The sharing of technologies had led to breakthroughs in medicine, energy production, and faster-than-light travel. Cultural exchange programs had flourished, with humans studying crystalline architecture, while Arcturians embraced Earth's arts and music. But perhaps the most profound change was philosophical. The concept of worthy opposition had evolved into a cornerstone of interstellar diplomacy. Conflicts still arose, but they were now governed by principles that Cthulhu had championed: the protection of civilians, the preservation of cultural heritage, and the recognition that all sentient life held inherent value. Admiral Chen, her hair now streaked with gray, often reflected on how Cthulhu's influence had shaped the younger generation. Human and Arcturian children grew up learning not just about their own heroes, but about heroes from all species. Cthulhu's story was taught not as a tale of war, but as a lesson in seeing beyond boundaries. The Void Parasites had tested this new unity almost immediately. Their first assault had come just 2 years after the funeral, a massive attack aimed at the Arcturian core worlds. They had expected to find an easy target. Instead, they encountered a combined fleet of human, Arcturian, and allied ships, using tactics that blended the best of all their military traditions. The battle had been fierce, but the outcome had proven Cthulhu right. United, they were far stronger than they had ever been alone. Human adaptability complemented Arcturian precision. Centaurian speed enhanced Rigelian power. What had begun as a desperate alliance had evolved into an elegant symphony of different species working as one. Now, as Gonzalez watched her cadets training together, she saw Cthulhu's true victory. Young humans and Arcturians moved in perfect coordination, each understanding and respecting the other's strengths. They no longer saw aliens when they looked at each other. They saw comrades, friends, fellow defenders of life itself. The Void Parasites still threatened the galaxy's edge, but they faced a changed universe. Every year, on the anniversary of Cthulhu's funeral, ships from all allied species gathered at Proxima Beta. They came not just to remember, but to renew their commitment to the principles that had united them. In the Hall of Honor, a new tradition had taken root. Whenever opposing forces found themselves in conflict, they would meet here first, beneath Cthulhu's hologram. Many disputes that might have led to war were resolved in this chamber, as potential enemies looked up at the being who had taught them all that honor knew no species. The greatest testament to Cthulhu's legacy wasn't in grand monuments or military victories. It was in the small moments. A human doctor using Arcturian healing crystals to save lives. Young officers from different species sharing meals and dreams. Children playing in parks that celebrated heroes from all civilizations. As the sun set on another day at Harmony Point, Gonzalez finished her lecture to the cadets with the words that had become the motto of the combined fleet: "Honor lights the way." The phrase was written in human letters and Arcturian crystals above the chamber's entrance, a reminder that the greatest battles are won not through force, but through understanding. Cthulhu's physical form had become one with Proxima Beta's stellar fire, but their wisdom continued to illuminate the path forward. In choosing to warn their enemies, in sacrificing everything for a greater good, they had shown that true heroism transcends all boundaries, of species, of empire, of space itself. The universe was vast and often dark, but because of one being's choice to embrace honor above all, countless lights now shone together against that darkness. It was, perhaps, the most worthy legacy any warrior could hope to achieve. Not to be remembered for the battles they won, but for the peace they made possible. As night fell over Harmony Point, the combined fleet continued its eternal vigil. Human ships flew alongside Arcturian cruisers, their different designs now complementing each other perfectly. And in the heart of Proxima Beta, Cthulhu's energy danced among the stellar winds, a constant reminder that the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to destroy enemies, but the courage to transform them into allies.